Back with you on the news feed here. Right, as I mentioned, a new debt rescue survey indicates that the vast majority of South African households are under extreme financial pressure. This has prompted many families to cut back on, or rather cancel their holiday celebrations entirely. A survey was conducted to determine the current state of consumer finances at this time of the year, which is traditionally associated with increased spending and gift giving. Debt Rescue's Chief Legal Officer, Annaline says that 71% of people in South Africa are just coping, while 32% are under severe financial pressure. She joins us to discuss this further. Annaline, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Talk to us about the methodology. I mean, how do you get to this number of the survey and those that you would have reached?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers. What we do is we do it in the form of a survey. So we open it up to the public, and we publish it on social media platforms, and we ask them to take part and tell us what they're truly experiencing. We want to hear from ordinary South Africans. What is it that they're experiencing? We have a certain expectation, but it's always very good for us to see how that translates into real numbers.
Right. And how alarming are these numbers, I mean, compared to what you would have seen in previous years?
They are more alarming. I mean, we were expecting to see something in the line that we've been seeing, people saying that they're just coping or under severe financial pressure. But if we look at the fact that 71% are saying they are just coping, 32 telling us they're under severe financial pressure, that is concerning. That is very much telling us that the majority of South African consumers are literally on the brink. If they're not already struggling with debt repayments, the cost of living crisis, and all these factors that place massive pressures on their budgets, it's very, very concerning for us.
What are the indices that you look at? I mean, your ability to, I suppose, pay debt, one, the ability to go on holiday, the ability to have a Christmas party. How exactly, what are the indices, shall I say, that you're looking at?
Well, the kind of questions we're asking is, have you had to cancel your travel plans? Did you have travel plans and have to change them? Have you had to make budgetary changes? Are you still giving gifts? If so, are you paying, spending less than you had before? And also trying to get a gauge. Are consumers, for example, do they have a budget? Have they planned for their spending for the festive season, whether it be food or gifts or going away, and whether they know exactly what they intend on buying, and whether they have just reached the end of the line and there is no funds available. Yeah.
Are you able to tell those you've surveyed if they are gainfully employed, and therefore what are the causes for them to be a little bit tighter this time of the year, or particularly in 2025? Is it because they are just more indebted? Is it because things are just more expensive, or just their buck is no longer going as further as it used to?
Well, yes, the main reasons we are seeing that when we ask, outright, what are the biggest contributors, it's cost of living. It's a combination of cost of living along with debt. As we know, we've had a couple of interest rate reductions this year. But we know that the cost of living has completely wiped out any of those savings, if we can call it that, coming from the interest rate cuts. And the reason for that is even though we're sitting with, for example, our inflation now finally sitting at the lower end of the 3 to 6% band, the reality is that for the average South African, that means even though it's going up by 3.2% or whatever the current figure is exactly, the majority of that percentage is being made up by food inflation. So food inflation is significantly higher than that, for example. And for us as ordinary South Africans, that's where our spending goes into, is having to put nutritious meals on the table for our families. And that is increasing much more than the other goods that are not carrying that much weight in our actual real life day-to-day budget. So cost of living, definitely biggest contributors.
So, I mean, when you listen to the finance minister, when he gives his budget speech, he'll tell you that, yes, things are not as flexible as they used to be for the economy of South Africa. However, then he speaks about how resilient this economy has been. Certainly, if you look at how particular certain businesses would have performed in particular sectors of the economy would have performed. How does that translate as far as families are concerned, the resilience of the economies of families?
Well, realistically, if we look at the numbers, it's telling us that South African consumers are truly struggling. We're a resilient people, so definitely we do what we possibly can. One of the very positive things that we did see from this is that from this survey has been that consumers are aware. They're very aware of what things cost. The intention is there very much to try and stay within a budget, to not overspend, etc. And they're very cost conscious, which is really a positive thing. So I think from that perspective, us as a people, we definitely are resilient, but we can only be resilient to a point. When it comes to ultimately putting food on the table, making sure that our families are fed and still trying to pay the bills, that's where the resilience might not translate into reality for many South Africans.
Yeah. For those who would have responded to your survey, I mean, how many of them, if you could tell the number, are aware of, I suppose, tools that are available for them legally so that could alleviate some of the pressure as far as, of course, credit is concerned and debt and so on and so forth?
Well, from our previous surveys, we've known that roughly about 40%, give or take, are aware of tools like budgeting, for example. Many of them are aware of it, but try and use it, but not always necessarily as often or as frequently as they would like to. But they are aware of it. I think it's just a question of, for us as consumers, is having to do that one thing most of us absolutely hate doing, and that's budgeting. We have to plan. We have to look at where we tap. We have to look at where we swipe, see where every cent goes, and try and make changes if we're still in a position to do so. Cut back on unnecessary expenses, shop smarter. Like I say, South Africans are really, really good at this. They know their prices. They're very savvy. They know when something is a special and when something isn't. And using something, for example, like this festive season, where there are a lot of specials going around, to be smart about it and say, okay, well, for example, if you're buying school goods for your child going back to school, look where you can get the best stationery prices, look where you can get the best school uniform prices. And I think that we are starting to see more and more is that South Africans are very, very aware of things like prices, and that they are trying to use that to the best of their abilities.
Now, when we spoke to Debt Rescue last year, maybe even a year before that, we were beginning to see a trend of buy now, pay later schemes, even beginning to infiltrate the grocery market quite extensively. I mean, are you seeing that trend continuing? And what warning do you have for people who are using credit in such a way?
Yeah, so obviously any form of using credit, buy now, pay later, means that literally I'm going to pay something off over a period of time, and if I put it on credit, straight credit like a store card or a credit card, it means I'm going to, if I don't pay it back within a certain period of time, I'm going to be paying interest. Now that is very concerning, because if you're buying consumables and you're having to pay interest on it and you're going to consume it before you've paid for it, that's very likely an indication that you might be over-indebted, that you might be struggling financially. And that's a very clear sign that you need help, and you need to potentially look towards something like debt counseling, which is part of the National Credit Act, and is there specifically to assist over-indebted consumers to find a way to avoid a debt spiral, not having to take out loans and credit cards, etc., to put food on the table.
What can be done from a policymaker's perspective? I mean, many would have been advocating for example, the Reserve Bank to use the monetary policy a little bit better to alleviate the pressures on South African households. But do you think there's more that can be done to reduce this household financial pressure?
I think there isn't really that much that can still be done. I think a lot of changes have already been made. And I mean, we know the Reserve Bank's mandate ultimately under the Constitution is to protect our currency and our inflation. So I think from that perspective, they're doing what they have to do, and they're being very cautious, knowing that obviously we're in a developing economy. So from a legislative perspective, hoping that when it comes to the budget speech, we're going to, one of the things that we still do have is zero vatting a few more items, and really looking at which items are, for example, currently being zero vatted, and increasing that on specific items that form part of our monthly budget, our grocery basket that we have to have, is increase that. That will already bring about a little bit of relief for consumers. But yes, realistically, what we would really like to see is we need to start seeing interest rates coming down, and properly, because they went up buy a lot very quickly, and they're coming down very slowly in small margins. And it's like I said, it's just unfortunately completely being taken away by the cost of living.
Well, others say we've seen improvement on the energy side, more available electricity. Well, if you ask others, they'll tell you it's because many people now have put up solar panels and they've got converters in their homes. That's why there's a little bit more stability on that front. But what we have not seen on the electricity side is price reduction. The price of fuel is also another challenge, which makes the cost of traveling a little bit higher. Are there some structural things that you think we need to pay attention to?
Well, we know that there's a lot of talk about, for example, the rail system being reviewed and revamped and for different industries. And I think that's probably quite an important one. And it'll take time. Unfortunately, there are no quick fixes there. It'll take time. It's going to take money. But that, for example, could help with transport of goods. We know that we are very road reliant in our country to transport goods. And what this means for us is every time we have a fuel price fluctuation, specifically on diesel, the goods that, even though it will affect us in our direct transport, indirectly we're paying for it as well, because the goods that we are buying are being transported by road, usually by diesel-powered vehicles, and therefore we're bearing those costs. So those are kind of things that infrastructure-wise definitely needs enhancement and improvement. But unfortunately, like I said, those are not things that come overnight. It takes time to make those changes.